It began with a quiet assumption. An assumption so solid, so mathematically certain, that Berlin believed Britain's defeat was already written before the first shot of the war was fired. German analysts weren't guessing or bragging. They were calculating. Cold numbers. Hard industry. And every major power, including Britain itself, accepted those numbers as truth. By 1939, German intelligence had studied Britain's aircraft industry with the same precision they used to design their war plans. Their reports all pointed to the same outcome. Britain had about 350,000 skilled aircraft workers, and German planners knew exactly what would happen the moment war began. Conscription would empty the factories. Not slowly, violently. They predicted that within 18 months, Britain would lose 70% of its aircraft production, not from bombing raids, but from simple arithmetic. Aircraft production in the 1930s wasn't something ordinary workers could jump into. A single Spitfire demanded more than 20,000 precision-made parts, each manufactured to measurements thinner than a sheet of paper. Rivet lines had to follow perfect curves. Engine mounts needed exact torque to avoid metal fatigue. Electrical systems were spiderwebs of wiring that only experienced fitters understood. This wasn't work anyone could perform after a week's training. This was craftsmanship built over decades. And German intelligence understood the value of those men, toolmakers, fitters, instrument experts, better than Britain did. So when Britain declared war on September 3, 1939, German planners believed they were watching their prediction unfold in real time. Fighter Command needed 1,000 new aircraft every month just to maintain its current strength, and even that assumed no losses. But every man who joined the RAF or the Army was one fewer man tightening bolts on a Hurricane engine or calibrating guns on a Blenheim. Inside Berlin, Reich Minister Albert Speer's early memos calmly predicted Britain's industrial collapse. By mid-1941, they estimated British output would fall below 400 aircraft a month, far less than Germany's own capacity. Some Luftwaffe officers even argued there was no point bombing Britain's factories. Why attack what will soon be empty? One joked. Their confidence rested on one belief so ingrained that it never appeared in writing. Advanced industry required men, skilled, trained, physically strong men. Every nation agreed. In 1939, neither Germany, America, nor the Soviet Union used women in serious industrial trades. The idea that Britain could replace its skilled men with new workers, let alone women, seemed impossible. And at first, Germany appeared absolutely right. The National Service Act, passed the same day war began, triggered a wave of call-ups. Factory floors that once roared with machinery began falling quiet. Supermarine's Southampton plant lost 40% of its skilled fitters by March 1940. Vickers Armstrong in Weybridge saw 300 toolmakers vanish into training camps in 1 month. Hawker's Langley facility watched its sheet metal specialists disappear faster than managers could rewrite schedules. The numbers were brutal. From 350,000 workers in 1939, the aircraft industry fell to 210,000 by late 1940, and many of those left were older, inexperienced, or exempt. Manchester's Metropolitan Vickers lost 62% of its workforce by spring 1941. De Havilland's Hatfield plant ran with barely half its pre-war staff. Even worse, many skilled men chose to enlist despite being officially protected. The pressure was overwhelming. Neighbors in uniform, newsreels of pilots climbing into cockpits, casualty lists after Dunkirk. Staying behind a workbench felt like cowardice. Rolls-Royce lost 800 Merlin engine workers in just 6 months. Meanwhile, production demand soared beyond reason. In May 1940, with France collapsing, the Air Ministry ordered 2,300 aircraft a month, a figure no factory could reach with its shrinking workforce. A Wellington bomber needed 28,000 hand-driven rivets. A Lancaster wing required 14-hour shifts of perfect precision. A single Merlin crankshaft demanded 70 hours of skilled machining. Factories began to look less like industrial centers and more like desperate machines pushed beyond human limits. At Castle Bromwich, the massive shadow factory built to mass-produce Spitfires, managers found themselves running production lines that felt like something out of a fever dream. And that is where Part 1 ends, right at the edge of Britain's coming industrial miracle, one no German expert saw coming. Castle Bromwich had opened in July 1940 with room for 1,000 workers, yet barely 320 showed up. When Lord Beaverbrook, the new Minister of Aircraft Production, toured the site, He found empty assembly jigs, locked tool rooms, and half-finished airframes waiting for fitters who no longer existed. Britain wasn't running a factory, it was running on hope. By spring 1941, the numbers had drifted from grim to absurd. Britain needed 600 fighters a month just to replace Battle of Britain losses. On top of that came bombers for the strategic offensive, training aircraft for the Empire Air Training Plan, maritime patrol planes, and transport aircraft for global supply routes. Taken together, the requirement exceeded 5,000 aircraft monthly. The remaining skilled workforce could perhaps manage 1,500 if they pushed themselves past exhaustion. To German intelligence, reading the intercepted production reports, it looked like total vindication. Britain was collapsing exactly as predicted. But Berlin didn't know that Britain had already made a decision that would tear up every assumption behind those predictions. On December 18, 1940, Ernest Bevin, Minister of Labour, stood in Parliament with a proposal almost unthinkable a year earlier. Britain would conscript women into factory work, into aircraft manufacturing itself. Not just auxiliary roles, not clerical duties, the real engineering, the precision trades, the supposedly male work of building Spitfires and Lancasters. It shook the country. This was a society raised on Victorian ideas about gender. Bevin wasn't proposing it out of idealism. Britain had simply run out of choices. The machinery of change moved fast. The Registration for Employment Order, issued on March 19, 1941, required every woman aged 18 to 60 to register for national service. This wasn't volunteering. This was compulsory wartime labor direction. The ministry estimated they needed 700,000 women in engineering and aircraft production within a year, up from just 90,000 women already in those industries, most in unskilled roles. The recruitment effort that followed was almost military in scale. Britain was divided into quotas. Women reported to employment exchanges where they were assessed and, if suitable, not invited, sent to training centers. Housewives who hadn't worked since marriage were told they'd be running milling machines in 6 weeks. Shop assistants from Marks & Spencer were informed they'd soon be fitting hydraulic lines into bomber tail sections. Hairdressers, teachers, seamstresses, any woman without small children was swept into the system. The target group made the scale clear. Women aged 20 to 40, even though those were prime childbearing years. Recruiters targeted housewives with husbands overseas, women used to routine and discipline. They recruited from shops for precision work, from textile mills for dexterity, even from domestic service because maids and cooks understood detail, order, and long hours. Administrative chaos followed instantly. Training centers needed to expand from small Depression-era programs into industrial schools capable of processing thousands of women per month. Buildings were seized, equipment installed, instructors recruited. Centers in Sheffield, Coventry, Birmingham, and Glasgow filled with rows of lathes, drill presses, rivet guns, sheet metal brakes, electrical benches, and mock airframes. Transport was another crisis. Aircraft factories ran 3 shifts, meaning women traveled at all hours across dangerous industrial regions. The ministry organized buses, negotiated special rail services, and arranged temporary housing near major plants. Women from Cornwall were sent to Coventry. Scots found themselves lodging in Southampton. Every night, the country felt stretched to its limits. And throughout Britain, one question echoed everywhere, from Parliament to factory canteens. Could this possibly work? Could women with no engineering background build machines on which pilots' lives depended? Resistance came fast. Engineering union leaders insisted women lacked the strength and technical ability for skilled metalwork. Factory foremen added specifics. Operating rivet guns on a Lancaster fuselage required sustained force. Lifting wing spars into alignment demanded upper body power. Sheet metal shears needed the weight and leverage men developed over years. Others questioned the technical side. Aircraft electrical systems held hundreds of connections, each needing perfect stripping, crimping, and soldering. One wrong polarity could damage a propeller synchronization system. One loose wire in a fuel pump could doom a bomber over the North Sea. Many doubted whether women with only weeks of training could master the spatial reasoning and mechanical judgment required. Even RAF pilots muttered doubts. Douglas Bader was said to insist he trusted aircraft built by men who understood flying, who knew what a misfiring Merlin cylinder meant at 12,000 feet. Doctors chimed in with warnings about solvents, noise, and night shift work. Social critics fretted about morality, family stability, and the unfeminizing effect of heavy industry. Everything pointed toward disaster. Never before had a nation attempted to transform non-engineers, often homemakers, into the builders of the world's most advanced aircraft. And yet, the government training centers wasted no time worrying. When Mary Churchill arrived at the Sheffield Centre in April 1941, she had been a legal secretary the week before. Her first lesson wasn't a lecture, it was a rivet gun placed directly into her hands. The training doctrine was brutally clear. Learn by doing. Repeat until the skill becomes instinct. The 6-week courses weren't compressed apprenticeships. They were something entirely new, wartime engineering, reinvented at speed. And this is where Part 2 ends, setting up the transformation no one believed was possible. What followed inside the training centers built on that momentum. Week 1 was pure immersion in tools. 4 8-hours a day, trainees drilled, cut, measured, and torqued bolts until their muscles learned the motions automatically. Retired craftsmen and medically exempt workers demonstrated each technique once. The women repeated it dozens of times until it became instinct. The belief that women's hands were too delicate quickly evaporated. Small fingers proved ideal for cramped cockpit spaces, and the fine control learned through years of sewing or housework translated directly into precision metalwork and wiring. Week 2 moved from practice pieces to real aircraft parts salvaged from crashes and combat damage. Spitfire wings torn by gunfire, Hurricane frames bent from rough landings, damaged Wellington tail sections. Women drilled out ruined rivets, replaced panels, and dismantled Merlin engine components, learning by touch what properly machined surfaces should feel like. This was no longer abstract training. Every corrected rivet represented a pilot's life. Weeks 3 and 4 introduced specialization. Women who excelled at circuits shifted into electrical work, learning to read wiring diagrams and trace faults. Those with steady nerves trained in instrument fitting, where a millimeter's error could throw off an altimeter. Others moved into hydraulics, fabric work, or engine installation based on ability, not outdated ideas about women's work. To accelerate learning, the centers abandoned old apprenticeship culture. Visual aids replaced dense explanations. Color-coded diagrams simplified complex systems. Assembly jigs were redesigned to use leverage instead of brute strength. Instructors noticed women asked different, sharper questions, often exposing vague procedures or unwritten shop habits. Their feedback forced clearer documentation, speeding the entire program. Week 5 was factory simulation, full speed, timed assemblies, fatigue management, night shift drills. Around 20% couldn't meet the required precision under pressure and were redirected to other war work. But the 80% who passed emerged after 6 weeks as certified specialists prepared for the production lines. By late 1941, these centers were turning out over 12,000 trained women every month, far surpassing expectations. They weren't master craftsmen, but they were competent, disciplined, and ready, exactly what the industry needed. The results appeared almost immediately. On July 14, 1941, the first Spitfire built almost entirely by women rolled out of Castle Bromwich. Flight Lieutenant Hugh Dundas took it up, watching for any vibration or structural flaw. The aircraft flew flawlessly. Within 6 months, Castle Bromwich employed over 10,000 women, producing 500 Spitfires a month, more than the entire British industry had ever made in a single pre-war month. By mid-1942, production numbers stunned German intelligence. Distributed factories, many staffed mostly by women, pushed output to levels thought impossible. Between 1940 and 1945, these dispersed supermarine plants produced 8,348 Spitfires. Avro's Manchester and Chatterton Works, with women comprising 75% of the workforce by 1943, built 7,377 Lancasters. De Havilland's women-led lines produced 7,781 Mosquitoes. At Hawker's Langley plant, women built 9,200 Hurricanes and took on the demanding Typhoon, whose sensitive engine installations had challenged even pre-war male crews. Even the Wellington, with its notoriously complex geodetic frame of 40,000 components, was increasingly built by women at Vickers Armstrong. At Short Brothers, women soon handled the massive Stirling bomber and equally demanding Sunderland flying boat, mastering watertight sealing and marine equipment installation. Across Britain, from Filton's Beaufighters and Blenheims to Handley Page's Halifaxes, women became the backbone of production. The numbers told the story. 1941, 20,194 aircraft. 1942, 23,672. 1943, 26,263. 1944, peak 26,461. More than Germany produced that year. By war's end, Britain had built over 120,000 military aircraft, with women directly responsible for at least 3/4 of them. And yet production figures captured only half the transformation. Women weren't merely replacing male labor, they were improving the system. At Vickers Armstrong's Weybridge plant in 1942, Wellington production stalled because aligning its geodetic fuselage required 4 highly synchronized fitters and 14 hours of coordinated work. Dorothy Russell, a former schoolteacher, observed for 2 days and proposed painting alignment markers inside the frame so each worker could verify position independently. Engineers were skeptical, but the trial worked. Assembly time dropped to 9 hours, and factories nationwide adopted the method within weeks. At Castle Bromwich, women on the quality control team questioned why slightly misaligned rivet holes from subcontractors were treated as normal. They suggested simple go/no-go gauges to catch defects earlier. After initial resistance and a temporary spike in rejected parts, subcontractors corrected their tooling. Spitfire assembly time fell by 3 hours per aircraft. Electrical problems on Lancaster navigation light circuits plagued the Avro plants until January 1943, when Margaret Dobson noticed failures were more common on night shift builds. She realized tired workers were pinching wires between bulkheads. Her fix, routing harnesses through rubber grommets, added minutes to assembly but eliminated the faults entirely. Women hadn't just kept Britain alive, they had quietly re-engineered the system. The adjustment quickly became standard on all new Lancasters and was added to older aircraft during routine servicing. Within 3 months, night lighting failures had fallen by more than 90%. Similar patterns emerged elsewhere. At Handley Page's Halifax lines, women handling hydraulic systems pinpointed a flaw engineers had accepted for years. The rear turret hydraulic pipes ran too close to the exhausts, overheating fluid on long missions. The official workaround told gunners to operate the turret gently. A team of women suggested rerouting the lines a few inches away using simple brackets. The modification cost almost nothing, demanded no structural overhaul, and solved a problem the factory had lived with since 1941. These small but relentless improvements slowly undermined the Luftwaffe's core assumption that British industry would collapse under sustained losses. German strategy had always rested on arithmetic: destroy fighters faster than Britain could replace them. Yet by late 1940 the numbers no longer made sense. Luftwaffe crews claimed hundreds of kills, but every raid still met full RAF squadrons. Unknown to them, night shifts at Castle Bromwich and Hawker were producing fighters at nearly twice the replacement rate German planners expected. During the height of the Battle of Britain, Fighter Command lost just over 900 aircraft, but factories delivered more than 1,500 replacements, turning a predicted deficit into a surplus. As the war expanded, the imbalance only grew. Even when Bomber Command lost dozens of aircraft in a single night over Germany, the next raid often launched with even larger formations. German pilots described the experience as fighting an opponent who replaced every destroyed aircraft with 2 more. By D-Day, Allied air forces flew 14,000 sorties in a single day, while the Luftwaffe, exhausted, outnumbered, and undersupplied, could barely manage a few hundred. The industrial advantage built by women in British factories had made German attrition strategy mathematically impossible. Victory in Europe brought an abrupt reversal. Within months of the war ending, the same factories that had relied on women for survival dismissed thousands of them. Government messaging pivoted from celebrating female skill to urging a return to domestic life. Trade unions pushed for the reinstatement of pre-war employment practices, and by 1947 women's presence in aircraft manufacturing had fallen below pre-war levels. Official histories soon rewrote the narrative, praising engineering genius, government oversight, and heroic aircrews while reducing the women who built the aircraft to background figures, or omitting them entirely. Yet their impact could not be wholly erased. Military planners worldwide had witnessed what Britain achieved when industrial labor was no longer defined by gender. The Soviet Union kept women in its post-war factories. The United States quietly incorporated female labor into future mobilization plans. The old belief that advanced manufacturing required exclusively male workers had been shattered. Most of the women who transformed British production returned to ordinary lives, rarely speaking publicly about what they had done. But they passed on something more enduring than records or medals: the certainty that skill, precision, and innovation are not limited by gender. The factories may have forgotten them, and official histories may have looked past them, but their work reshaped modern warfare by proving a simple truth: victory belongs to those who can build faster than their enemy can destroy.